So that's why
So,
we have one mirror facing forward and one mirror in the opposite direction for charging and discharging. Is that correct?
no, 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 it's for really blocking. Because the ether doesn't like to go through a totally smooth metal surface. You see, the reason you use the mirrors is you can take like a grade 3 ball bearing, the finest ball bearings man makes, and look under a 800 magnification. You know what the surface of that looks like
Oh, it's
full of
like the surface.
canyons.
Yeah, it's like the surface of the moon or Mars. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, if you take glass and you deposit silvering on it, the mirror silvering in the mirror is a very specific formula. There's the variants of materials you can use, but typically the process and the procedure to get a mirror is the same for hundreds of years now. When that metallic film is on glass, it no longer looks. It's really truly smooth the first time, and it doesn't look like the surface of the moon at all. And now the ether really comes along a textbook model of an ultra flat surface, and it doesn't want to go through it. But it eventually does. It just forms a momentary pause, and that creates a low potential behind it. Right? And you don't want to accumulate anything behind the mirror, so you put another mirror on the other side. So it gives it a double whammy. Because remember, the ether supposedly has direction, but because it moves so rapidly, it doesn't seem like it has direction, so we put mirrors on both sides. It's kind of like film. When you watch film, it's lots of still frames moving quickly to give the illusion that you see seamless motion, right? Think of it that way.
And what would the effect be, if anything, by increasing the gap between the mirrors, or is that not important?
Not important at this point. I think what I was going to do is to play around with the potential. This was the next translator I was going to build. Is the gap between the mirrors? I was going to put a flat wound coil, and the leads of that coil go beyond the mirror and attach to the metal part of the translator. So you have the metal part of the translator capped with double mirrors, but between the mirrors is a coil that translates that void of energy back to the metal, and vice versa, part of the tube.
So then there'd be a very slight gap between the mirrors.
Yeah, I'm going to use like a 30 gauge,
Oh, a good one.
a very
Yeah,
narrow
that
wire.
sounds insane.
Well,
We were talking about maybe sticking a bit of like silk or something between the mirrors, but go the coil.
a flat coil, a pancake coil, very
Yeah.
fine wire. Yeah, because right now
And
I've been measuring
what about the other end of the coil? Does that just stop in the centre? That doesn't
the
go in.
two ends. I was going to do bifilar. You know what bifilar is? You take a piece of wire,
Over in the
you bend it in half, and then wind it. So the
Yeah.
two ends go to the center or outside. Bifilar is the
And
best.
those will obviously be insulated or not touching each other.
Yeah, they're insulated by lacquer, like a motor wound coil. Right?
Yeah.
A good lacquer, and then both leads go because we're dealing with a monopole. Both of them get attached to opposite fixing points on the same end of the metal tube.
yeah.
That's going to be one hell of
Sounds good.
yeah. That's going to create one hell of a potential in the middle.
Yeah.
Because the tube is reflecting, right? So now we're sending any leakage back to the tube and vice versa.
And somebody said to me, "Don't try make them more powerful."
I think it'll either be super
That
powerful or not work at all. Yeah, these are like little. In other words, this is not a radical change to do. In other words, I have two mirrors that need to be connected anyway. How long does it take me to take very fine wire, like maybe twice the thickness of a human hair, 28 gauge, 30 gauge, very fine, by the way, and wind a flat coil, a few minutes, and layer it on one mirror, right, flat, arrange it, and then glue the other mirror over it. And I might use a rubber cement, who I could pull apart,
Or could you encapsulate it in resin?
Or I might not use any of that, or encapsulated resin, or I might just use a very thin bit of alu foil tape on the edge and leave it airspace in the middle. Because remember, air is a dielectric, right? remember, if air carries electricity as well, like an insulator. If you don't, and I told this to someone recently, they said, no, air doesn't carry electricity. I'm like, really? What do you think a spark or lightning is
Hmm.
traveling?
Well, that's like when I put the small tube in the double layered water cannon. It's all air. Okay, you've got 2 layers of paint on the inner tube, and then like a good inch of air, and then the outer tube.
So
that works?
Sorry, John. Is a vacuum an insulator then? Because the only reason we see lightning is because the temperature's that high. It produces light as it burns whatever's in the way.
Okay, a lot of insulators are more rated by their reactance or capacitance, not their inductance, right? Like most metals are rated by their inductance in millihenries or henries, and most non-metals are measured by their capacitive value when it comes to their insulation. They have a capacitance, and it's called reactance. So air, being not in a vacuum, it's got humidity and dust particles, will have a certain capacitance. The denser the insulator, the more capacitance to a certain degree. Dielectric, right?
Mm.
Now, when you put a vacuum,
that's why the humidity works in my favor, I think.
Yeah, somewhat, and also, it also stuffs up the ether. In other words, it'll accumulate and saturate with ether, and you can't relieve it that easily, or unless you're going with a real sharp cut.
No, but in the air gap, you're talking about the quality of the air in the air gap.
Oh yeah. But if you go into
very humid, it's dense already.
Yeah, and that's the reactance of it, but it's still air. But when you go into a vacuum, now you have less air, and what happens? The reactance goes down, the capacitance goes down. But here's the thing: if you try to pull an absolute vacuum, which is difficult to do, some laboratories got 2-stage vacuum pumps, and they pull a vacuum on it for days. Right? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've used them. Yeah, I used to have 2 of them and 2 big 4-foot chambers. I wished I'd still got them.
Yeah, to do what they call, like the physicists, when they pull a vacuum on a bathysphere or something, they run it for about a week, and and then they have to. And the rating of the vacuum is based on how long you've been pulling a vacuum with a certain type of pump. But really, no one knows what an absolute vacuum is. Because, by the way, space is not a vacuum. There's still rarefied gases in space. But
yeah, there would always be a few vortexes flowing around in there somewhere.
Yeah, but the Russians pulled some kind of vacuum for like a year on something, and no, it was funny, and they had
that's commitment.
Yeah, and they had some electrodes of different metals, like from noble metals to base metals, and they started throwing frequencies and charges, and they noticed that it was more active in this super vacuum than in any other medium. So that means that they were wondering what's carrying these charges if there's nothing in there.
Mm.
That's like that clip that you showed us a while back. They drew a vacuum on a roll of sticky tape.
Yeah.
And they unrolled the sticky tape, and there's gamma radiation, X-rays, and all kinds of particles flying out just from the sticky tape.
That would be a bummer if you're running a vacuum for a year and you say, right lads, we're going to do an experiment in an hour, and then the seal goes on it.
Oh yeah.
Oh
they
dear.
overbuilt it. Yeah. I think they might have had some redundancy in there.
I used to work on a 3-foot wide vacuum, and it had a 2-inch slab of polycarbonate on top as the window, just a disc. It cost a fortune. We bought it from General Electric because I was using silicons and vacuuming all the air out. So it actually boils when the temperature drops and all the air keeps coming. Then when you let the air in, it's perfectly free of air bubbles. And I remember seeing a fly in one day. It was too late. The thing was going berserk because obviously the air's coming out, and then it just dropped stone dead. And they don't explode because the air comes out slowly, but it made a mess of its head, you know.
Yeah, it did.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's painful. Yeah, to be in that kind of situation. Pressure changes are, not to be taken. Even a slight pressure. Well, depressurization or pressurization problems in a jet airplane, you feel them quite significantly.
Yeah, or scuba divers.
Yeah, you can kill you. Yeah.
Yeah, they have to recompress them in a compressor chamber to get the bubbles go small again, and then release it slowly. Yeah.
Pressure is important. Well, Trevor talked about the lower the vacuum, the more active the ether. But it goes from low to high. So when he meant the more active the ether, the less material means less ether, which fed the ether around it. See, so it's backwards. It's not because the vacuum is low, the ether builds up. The ether gets lower too, but the low feeds the high. So you have to kind of
low.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to work as hard, so he can get away with less.
Well, nothing's really happening ethereally in the vacuum either, but because it goes from low to high, everything around it gets fed, and it seems like it's powerful.
Depends what you're looking to do.
Yeah, where's the ether? Everywhere. So if you create a potential that's really low in one spot, everywhere else it seems like it's strong, right? Like it's emanating, but it's not. Okay, we're used to things being strong because they emanate a lot of force, right? Like a high wattage light bulb or a bomb or a grenade or whatever. But in order to make something ethereally powerful, you have to drain it of all of its ether, and then when you perceive it, it seems like it's feeding everything around it, which it is because it goes from low to high.
Yeah.
So it's kind of difficult to grasp. Even if you've been working at it for a while, you really got to pause for a minute and catch it in your mind. A super vacuum means an evacuation of the ether, which makes it so powerful to the ether around it.
Yeah, we've talked about this for a while.
Low to high.
Thinking the concept, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I was doing.
Etheric low and etherical high is the opposite of a meteorological,
right,
synoptic.
That's why the coil that goes between the mirrors, I may not want to feed it to the metal. I've been running this scenario for a week now. I might want to feed it to the silk, because the silk is where it accumulates, not the metal. The coil, the black coil that goes between the mirrors, should be, the two leads should be woven through the silk, not through the metal tube.
So what's the... Sorry, go on.
No, what I was going to do, another scenario, is no metal tube, just silk wound around a piece of plastic with two mirrors on the end with the coil between the mirrors, and then the extra pieces of wire that come out of the coil is the metal component that goes under the silk, and that's it. That's all you need.
Do they run full length, though?
Yeah, or halfway. Or tuned.
Yeah.
That's all. It's enough.
I like it.
Because that's super low. Because the purpose of putting the metal is to create a low potential, because it reflects, right?
So what's the effect when if you were in outer space?
What I'm trying to do is make them more minimal. What's that, Harry?
If you were in outer space, we are on about being in an atmosphere where there's a vacuum in the chamber. So in outer space, if you're in a container which is pressurized and there's a vacuum outside, which we know there isn't, but in as far as pressure it is.
But it is vacuumous,
yeah.
Relatively speaking.
You've got the opposite.
Yeah, you'll be overcharged in space. You probably don't have to sleep and eat as much because that low potential of ether in space, you representing a higher potential, will be charging you constantly. See, that's how space charges the planet. That you concentrate some ether on the planet, which makes it a higher potential in the space around it, and then you leave it alone, and all the lower potential around space feeds the planet. That's your free energy secret right there. That's why space seems vacuous.
That what it is.
Yeah.
And that's why Earth seems to be so constant.
Be fed. Because it was charged up initially, and the higher you make the charge, and the the lower the surroundings around it, then the more it's going to feed it, and the higher it keeps going.
Self-sustaining.
Yeah, exactly.
System.
I saw a video on a free energy device called by Muamma. He's an Indian guy, and there were scientists in a class, and he brought it in. It's a bit bigger than a bucket, and it's got discs within discs that run in separate directions, in opposing directions.
Yeah, torsion.
Yeah, and this thing was flying round with incredible energy in it, and then he just took it apart, and all he's got is lines of discs, no magnets, no wires running around the place, just discs against discs.
Are they all the same metal? Or is there a mix of aluminium and
I think there was coils. I think there was coils on the inside with magnets, but the way it was set up was really tight on the inside. And all he did, he put a capacitor across it, and the thing just kicked into life and kept going. Let me see if I can get the video, because you can see it in a few seconds. Really impressive.
Yeah, this way I can just copy the link at the time that I want, and I tell them just watch for 30 seconds, and that's fine, even if it's a 4-hour video.
I've done that, so that should take you to that spot.
Right. Brilliant. And this is how old of a video?
This is in 2010, but he's made others since these as well. But you can tell by the sound it makes as well, there's some energy going around in that.
Well, work, yeah. Energy, real energy is silent and quiet and unnoticeable. It's the power that starts making noise based on what it's doing and what it's coming through, what it's being manifested through. So,
somebody said, well, what about the torque in it? You know, because you can make something go fast, but there isn't much torque in it. So he's got a
load on it.
Yeah, he's got a prop on it, and they measure the torque coming through, and it's fairly considerable as it goes down this tube.
So it takes a load as well, right?
Yeah. His later one, he reckons it can indefinitely generate 4 kilowatts. Most houses could run on that.
Yeah, a big fridge and a couple of lights or so will be like 2,000 or 3,000, running all day long.
Yeah.
Most of your stuff, yeah. Fridge is a kilowatt, yeah.
Yeah. It's just the surge is like on a washing machine or a dishwasher. The surge can be 3 or 4 times greater than the running.
Yeah, it usually is, yeah.
Yeah.
On the startup, yeah.
Yeah. And if it's a big electric motor, it can be nearly 10 times, I believe.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But very interesting piece of kit, because later in this, he takes it to pieces.
What's his purpose of putting this together?
He's in a university with lots of scientists who...
It's some kind of generator. Is that supposed to be?
Yeah.
It's about
well, it's equivalent. It's like electric motor without putting energy into it. It's got a drive shaft, a shaft that comes out of it on the other end.
Okay.
Well, I've been trying to figure it out, I mean, I've done sort of inventions and stuff, but it's a weird...
the scientists themselves, they're thick. They put out a lot of hoaxes, just like then they deny it, just to keep people like the governments. The world government puts out notion that they're UFOs and aliens visiting mankind and screwing around with him, and yet they deny it also, so they could watch everyone see how they take it, just to create I don't know what you call it, busy work for everyone. They want everyone to listen to what they're saying and make them crazy. So
cognitive dissonance.
The continuation of the deception, yeah.
Yeah, it's because it's easier to deceive people than to
tell them the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't want to hear the truth.
Well, they don't want it. The people are actually being accommodated. Show me anywhere, any society where people were not accommodated by whether it was good or bad. Even communist Soviet Russia, no matter what went down in these places, no matter how good or how bad, it was accommodating the people. People thought it was good at the moment. It doesn't matter if it turns out to be bad. If you think something is good at the moment and you agree to have it, well, guess what? You're being accommodated now. Even if you turn it away later, doesn't matter. At the moment, you were being accommodated. And this goes on and on and on and on. That's why I constantly discuss, go after it with discernment. Discern what you're doing, so this way you don't have to be accommodated with deception.
So, what's your first impression on that piece of equipment?
Oh, I'll watch it later.
Yeah. There's a few other ones that'll come up when you watch that one on this particular gentleman. He's made even bigger ones since then. So, yeah. Have you attempted any free energy equipment or something that will capture potential?
We were talking about a Tesla coil a while back to do the wireless transmission.
Yeah, that's not just a coil, that's two resonant devices that will communicate anywhere on the planet, through the Earth.
But, might be something to try another time.
Yeah, it's not just a coil, it's a series of coils, a switching device. The two devices have to be identical as possible, and then when they're made, they have to be tuned next to each other, whether it's a meter away or 5 meters away. It doesn't matter how far they are from each other. Once they're tuned to each other and adjusted, then no matter where you put them in the universe or on the planet, they're going to resonate to each other instantly. That's the thing about Tesla stuff. It was longitudinal. So if you tune two devices, whether they were both on the table next to each other once they were tuned or across the planet, it didn't matter. The distance didn't matter. Does it sound like something we know about?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting piece of kit. I'd love to know physically how it works, but
it's simple. It's if you're making a pump, and you're not making a pump. Sorry, it's about getting things in tuning and resonance perfectly with the inductance and capacitance and resistance have to be matched. You ever hear of circuits? They call it impedance matching the circuit.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah. Sometimes they have sound deadeners which reflect an inverted frequency to what's present, and you end up with silence.
Yeah, they've got them headphone speakers. With silence, room silencers. They pick up any incoming noise, invert the signal, and broadcast the opposite.
Yeah.
And you don't hear any traffic, or there's headphones and stuff like that out there. Apparently, they're really quite effective.
Well, that's some interesting stuff
Can we
there.
wrap it up?
Yeah, it's interesting. I will see what happens to the temperatures in France then.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go to bed. Let's see when
Yeah.
my sun is up.
Thanks, Stelios.
Yeah.
We'll
Right.
catch up later, boys. Yeah, cheers.
All right.
See you.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.